ICICIdirect. Joining us now is Sandeep Aggarwal, Chairman and CEO of Droom Technology Limited. Growth in the e-commerce world has catapulted exponentially amidst the global pandemic. In India as well, with increased internet and smartphone usage in the urban and rural landscape, the e-commerce space has been fast growing and is poised to grow to $200 billion by 2026. E-commerce has changed the business landscape, fueling consumption by providing direct access to end consumers and creating new job opportunities. With the budget coming at the backdrop of recovery, notwithstanding the Omicron threat, the sector is looking for booster shots, especially around tax laws to help drive overall investments and ease of operations. Sandeep, thanks for joining us today on the show.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
A very broad, and then of course we move into the sector-specific questions. But what do you think? Could this budget focus more on populist measures, especially ahead of state elections, or would it be growth-focused?
In my view, again, I'm a tech entrepreneur, not a statesman, but I think the budget should be focused on economic progress, uplifting the standard of living for the people, and something which can bring economic progress, independent of election cycles. So in my view, this budget is very, very important, given that globally, we have seen, very precarious environment due to the several waves of COVID and recent sell-off in the capital market, which is also sometime reflection of near-term headwinds. So I think this this budget would be very, very important. And I believe that similar to the prior years, the Indian stock market in terms of overall wealth creation, economic progress has been fairly encouraging, and I hope this budget continues to fuel that growth.
Sandeep, as our homegrown startups, largely in the e-commerce space, continue to drive the country to economic revival and growth, I think the big ask really from the space is that the budget should hopefully provide the ecosystem that's necessary for the momentum to leap ahead, right?
Absolutely. In India, we have come a long way in last 1 decade in terms of homegrown startups and the startup ecosystem. But still, there are four or five constraints. Again, on a relative basis, they all are becoming better, but there's so much more headroom to improve. Number one, if we can make the capital accessibility more easier, if we can lower the cost of capital. Yeah. Third is if we can improve the infrastructure. While India has done a good job of bringing the data cost down in terms of global peer, still, there's so much headroom, given that India has not seen much of organized retail revolution in the past 2-3 decades. I think internet and e-commerce has a promise to help India leapfrog in a 21st century with a heavier use of technology versus industrialized countries. Yeah. So I hope, you are right. I think this budget, if it provides more for the better technology infrastructure, accessibility for the capital, maybe even lower the entry barrier. What does it take to get, become a public company, go global? All those will help to, the ecosystem. Entrepreneurs know what to do, but the policy framework, capital, and ecosystem absolutely play a role how far the company can go.
No, you're right. And despite that, I mean, we've seen unicorns literally jumping out of the bandwagon in the last year. Let's talk about specific issues of the sector, right? And I know in 2020, the government introduced a new provision imposing withholding tax obligation on the e-commerce operators. Now, while certain aspects regarding this provision have been clarified by the IT department, ambiguities continue to remain, such as applicability of the provision on platforms merely listing products of other online sellers or e-commerce operators. Can we expect more clarity here? Because it's the ambiguity that gets a lot of the problems created to begin with, right?
See, absolutely. India does not have a very mature policy framework, unlike US, Western Europe, Japan, etc. So every time you have a new industry, it takes probably decade or decade and a half for policy framework and more other things to fully settle down. And then what is happening in India, country like India, where the tax collection, any type of direct or indirect tax collection is always a more arduous task. Um, I think I'm not complaining, but e-commerce and internet companies almost become almost like a regulate are expected to behave like a regulator and watchdogs and
Yeah.
collect taxes on government behalf. So we theoretically get really little bit more penalized. More clarity will obviously help, because in startup companies, while they are, of course, India has created a record number of unicorns. The ecosystem is ballooning. A lot of good things are happening, but still we have limited bandwidth, limited capital, and limited attention span, and so many competing priorities.
Yeah.
So my only request to government would be, use us less often and allows us to just bring more disruption and innovation.
You're right. Focus on what matters, really. I just want to continue talking about the taxation space because I think that really is a big ask from the industry. The equalization levy, right? Provisions, I believe, were expanded on the 1st of April 2020 to include a 2% levy on online transactions involving sale of goods, provision of service by NRIs. And now, while certain clarifications were introduced last year, again, there is ambiguity, interpretational issues around the scope and coverage of the EL provision, which still exists. Are you expecting anything on this front?
I'm expecting, actually, yes, this topic plus from our category, which I kind of represent, automobile. Also, there has been a lot of ask for lowering the GST. So
Yeah.
absolutely, the topic which you have asked me twice, I think it's absolutely, that topic requires a lot of clarification. There have also been a lot of other topics around e-commerce, in terms of foreign direct investments or role of marketplace, etc. So I'm hoping that this budget will bring some more clarity.
Right. Also, Sandeep, I want to talk about the recent emergence of several unicorns that we've seen in the last few years in India. And you will probably be the best person to answer this for me as well. The big challenge is to really give them a path, or give entities like yourself a path to equity markets. And only then is there going to be value creation, right? So, do you think a clear market strategy, a clear sort of a quicker access to public listing, including direct offshore, is the need of the hour, and we could expect some reforms on that front?
Absolutely. See, I've been into my entrepreneurial journey for 11 years and have founded two unicorns. So feel very fortunate. But I think if I can absolutely ask for more, but I have a lot of to thank about what this country has given me. But just to put a context together here, I would say lowering the policy frameworks in terms of creating a company, winding down the
Mhm.
company getting listed in India or offshore, which absolutely help Indian startup ecosystem. Right? If you think, a few things I mentioned towards the beginning in terms of lowering the cost of capital, making it accessible, simplifying the tax regime, all these will help. But I must say one thing. India actually has done a fairly good job, where there's no need of tapping into the offshore IPO. As you have seen in the last 1.5 years, there have been a flurry of new age companies going IPO. That was never the case. These new age companies have been around in United States since 1994.
Yeah.
uh, but you have seen only Indian bound companies going IPO right here in our home stock exchanges in the last 1 year. So I feel this is also an accomplishment, but obviously more can be done to simplify the process to reaching there.
A relatively smaller ask, but still important, is the employee stock option plans. I know this is again a long pending ask to defer taxation to the point of liquidity is against the point of exercise. Very relevant, at least in your industry, right? Or in the startup e commerce space. What are your thoughts? How relevant is
Yeah.
this? Will anything get done, you think?
Thank you for asking that question. Honestly, this is very, very close to our heart. We don't, most of the new age companies, they don't have 2000 acre jameen sorry, 2000 acre land, or imported German machine, right? Our IP is built based on the people, right? And people are rewarded not because startups are in a position to give three times more than the comparable salary, right? So one of the big attraction to for the talent working in a startup is really the wealth one can create through ESOP. the issue which you have highlighted is a very lingering problem,
Mhm.
and it is a single biggest gating factor for how prevalent ESOP can be as a culture part of India's new ecosystem. So I hope the ESOP tax is based on the capital gain realization rather than how it gets accrued. That will absolutely make things simplified. If you allow me, I would also like to add one more thing, is also the founders' capital gain. If they plow back
Yeah.
into the ecosystem, should have 100% tax exemption. That will also solve the problem of the capital availability. If
Yeah.
I and many of my counterparts have made or will be making our wealth through the ecosystem, why would we not like to give it back?
Yeah.
Right, so it makes all sense. But government absolutely, if they can give a tax advantage, a lot of capital just can stay in a startup ecosystem.
Yeah, that would be one stone and two birds. But I want to continue talking about this for a minute. To also talk about the DPIIT registered startups. Now, this is largely for expansion, organic, potentially inorganic. Do you think getting away or doing away with issues surrounding taxability also might be helpful? While capital is important, the taxability issue around all this expansion might also ease the way for more coming in, right? And of course, eventually then creating employment.
So you sorry, but what tax are you talking about?
I said I was talking about the DPIIT organic and inorganic expansion, which has a lot of the indirect taxations around it and the ambiguity around it. If you're looking at expansion internationally and locally, right?
Sure. I mean, yeah, absolutely. You see, generally, if you look at in the since industrial revolution in 1750 until now, most of the time, the best things government can do actually to stay away from the disruption and innovation and let just this happen. None of us are smoking guns or doing something which is not in national interest. But my feeling is for any new industry, for 15-20 years, if we talk less about policy framework and
Yeah.
definitely not talk about tax of any kind, can eventually create a lot of wealth for the nation and a lot of new job creation. So anytime you bring the tax or policy, I feel if it is not there, that's a best case scenario, and if it is least possible, that's a second best. But in a new industries, there are so many things which have to be proven first time, and there's no
Hmm.
and the history does not give us luxury of learning and making less number of mistakes. So government best thing government can do is really keep a tax environment and policy framework extremely startup friendly.
Right. Sandeep, I don't know whether you could relate to this, but the recent, I mean, of course, like you said, because it's such a new age industry, there's no historical data to go by in that sense. We've recently seen that there's been so much of policy changes that keep coming along, and a lot of it is ad hoc and evolving in nature, right? How important do you think is it for the regulators to adapt a more consultative approach, to talk to industry participants like yourself before they, of course, go out and reduce in order to reduce uncertainty around doing business? So continued policy changes impact the sector, but if it's done in a consultative manner and an ongoing basis with stakeholders, that could be very helpful, I'd imagine, right?
Absolutely. I think that's very, very important part. And again, if you look at the global peer group, the size of Indian economy or larger, I mean, that's how things happen.
Hmm.
Ultimately, the policy framework should be very fair, very transparent, but it should be designed to promote industry, to promote more job creation and more wealth creation. So that consultative approach is very, very important. Again, if I see the glass half full rather than glass half empty, I must say, I spent majority of my adult life in Silicon Valley, and I've been living in India for last 11 years. I think directionally it has gone up. I receive more often inbound queries from the trade bodies who are basically going to give their inputs to the government for the upcoming, policy decisions. So I'm noticing that collaborative approach is absolutely on the rise. It may not be at par with the global peers, but it's absolutely on the rise. And it's very, to your point, it's absolutely very important.
Very lastly, Sandeep, while you represent, there's clearly an overlap, right, between auto and e-commerce, and you're on the receiving end to a very large extent. I just want to get a sense from you of what can we expect from the auto sector. I mean, two-wheelers have been seeing buying in the listed pace. There is an EV push. Any favorable outcome from the budget that's expected for the auto space, two-wheelers in particular, potentially four-wheelers as well?
See, absolutely. If you just allow me, last 3-4 years, or maybe last 5-7 years, government's unnatural push towards towards electric vehicle, just before the ecosystem was ready. A shift from BS4 fuel emission to BS6, and many other policy framework, GST, demonetization, etc., have been quite, I would say, horrific for the automobile sector, which almost account for 50% of the total India's manufacturing. And philosophically, I would say that no country has ever achieved economic freedom unless it has given transportation freedom to its people. Right? In India, while it is the fifth largest automobile market in the world, it is 60th plus in terms of per capita vehicle availability. So if you want economic progress and you want higher adoptability of automobile on a per household basis, obviously framework has to be very, very harmonious, very encouraging. So 3-4 things we would like in this budget to see. Number one, let the electric vehicle adoption happen at its own pace based on country's unique structural advantage and constraint.
Right.
Second thing is, I think the GST, if can be lowered in terms of when the ownership change hand, will tremendously help this country. Third is, even in the 21st century, the automobile registration and the transfer is restricted to 50-100 kilometer radius. If I'm moving from New Delhi to Bangalore, it is not easy, or it's not cheap for me to now get a Bangalore license plate number. So can we encourage interstate transfer? That would help tremendously. Another is, India has 1,000 plus RTO. Some places you can get a transfer in 15 days, some places in 60 days. Can we lower? Can we come up with a well-defined service level agreement, right? And overall digitization, especially in terms of vehicle history and what data is available. These 4-5 things absolutely will help this very important industry for the country.
Indeed, Sandeep. I think we've covered most aspects, but anything else that's on the ask list that I've missed out?
No, I think you covered a lot of aspect. I feel, I think just in general, I hope this is a very progressive budget because the government stimulus packages globally have helped humanity and economy to withstand the headwinds we are seeing since March 2020. There are a lot of signs. I'm not a medical expert by any means, but there are more signs that perhaps it's already from pandemic, it's endemic, but COVID has taken a lot of toll. So I hope this budget really paves the way for a very expansionary policy which India badly needs.
Indeed, but if you look at what's happening globally, I think everyone's moving in the other direction. With the current account deficit also at an 8-year high, I think rising inflation, higher crude, state elections, it's going to be a tight rope for the finance minister to walk this year. But great talking to you, Sandeep. Good luck. You've got a very busy year ahead with expectation. We'll hopefully see you soon on the IPO space as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Sandeep.
Thank you.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all related documents carefully before investing.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to never miss an update from ICICI Direct.